Coming at you with episode 10 of the Exit Philosophy podcast and going a little off schedule. Griff and I are here on a Wednesday morning. It is July the 12th, and we decided that we were going to wait a couple of extra days because we usually record on a Monday to get through the All-Star Game festivities, the game itself, and the draft. Which, of course, went down, and there are some Blue Jays youngsters that we'll be talking about on this program. But Griff, bright and early, up and at 'em on this Wednesday morning. It's before 9 a.m. Eastern as we're talking, and thank God for coffee.
Yeah, you bet. And you're right. I mean, it made no sense to go our usual Monday morning schedule with everything that was going on that was relevant to what we do, talking about the draft, talking about the All-Star game, talking about the home run derby. That all needed to be done. So here we are, here we sit and ready to go.
So I'm just going to warn you, there will be times in the next 45 minutes to an hour or 2.5 hours, knowing us, however the hell long this is going to go, where I may come off suddenly as an old curmudgeon. And I don't want to be that guy, but suddenly I'm finding I'm that guy. You know, when you're 18, 19, or 20 years old and you're telling your friends and you're promising yourself, I'm never going to be the person who, when they get older, says, back in my day, right? The old walking uphill both directions to school in 20 feet of snow. But with the All-Star Game, Griff, I now am understanding how, when you go from being young to middle-aged, you become that person. I just want the players to wear their team uniforms in the game for multiple reasons. One, baseball does it, basketball didn't, football doesn't, didn't, hockey doesn't, didn't. Baseball did, so it was not only a cool visual, but it also helped us easily identify the players. I'm so old now. I'm staring at the TV last night, and if the broadcasters aren't talking about somebody, I'd glance at a guy, and I'd be like, I don't know, just based on his face, I don't know who that is.
I'm feeling like the surf's up, dude. Let's go. I'm feeling like that guy. But compared to you, but I agree. I mean, I went to so many All-Star games and watched so many All-Star games on TV. And you're right. When you had Barry Bonds standing next to guys that, with another team, and
like Tony Gwynn,
they're being introduced on the line, and then they're in the game and they do something special. I remember I was in a home run pool and I had Bonds, and there's $20 a ticket, and I had Bonds, and Torrey Hunter went over the fence in the first inning and pulled one back, and so I lost that entire pool of $400 or whatever it was. And I knew immediately who had made the catch, and then Bonds hit one of his next at bat, so I still won the money. But the point is that you can just look out at the field and know who's playing what position. And because there's so many changes in an All-Star game, it's important that you can just glance out there and not be listening to the broadcast and know who's in what position. And like, I know it's all about merchandising, and I know it's all about selling those ugly AL and those ugly NL uniforms, but they could have them wear them for the intros where they came in from center field through the young fans. They could have them wear them there. They could have them wear them for batting practice. But once the game starts, I agree with you. They should be wearing their home team uniforms for the American League yesterday and the visitors for the National League.
But it used to be, Griff, that the home run derby participants wore the American or national shirts, right? And all the other players who were standing around with their kids watching the derby had those league specific as opposed to team specific jerseys on the Monday nights. And I think that's effective because when you're watching the home run derby, it's one guy in the batter's box. Right. You know who it is, and he's representing or helping to represent his league. Well, when he's playing in the game, he's representing his team playing for the league.
Well, that's the beauty of the all-star game in baseball, is that it's always such a one-on-one, and it makes it the most competitive all-star game there is. And like the home run derby is no different than an at bat in the game itself, where it's the pitcher and the hitter, and the support cast is in the field to make a play if the ball is hit towards them. But the focus is the same as it is in a regular season game. And you could see that in the All-Star game in Seattle yesterday. Like, as we said, we're recording on Wednesday morning, but just the fire and the competitiveness as the game went into late innings, and the lead changed to the National League, and they were trying to break a losing streak. And it's just so good compared to the NBA game, where as that game wound down, you had guys moving back to take like 40-foot three-pointers to show how great they are, not their team or their league or their whatever. Well, they were selected by the captains. I mean, it's just a joke in other sports, and shinny in hockey, it turns into pond hockey. But baseball is baseball, one-on-one, the best against the best. And it's always I always get a kick out of watching it anyway.
And shout out to Rob Thompson, first Canadian manager to manage an all-star team, obviously representing the National League as the defending World Series finalist Philadelphia Phillies manager. And he gets the win. And I'm sitting there in the bottom of the ninth inning last night, Griff, and I'm thinking, I don't think Rob Thompson is overly thrilled that his own closer, Craig Kimbrell, is up near 30 pitches in the middle of the All-Star break, right? Like,
and it's not like he's going to go get somebody else to go up to get up and finish that game for Kimbrell. I mean, that was it. And now he's got a couple of days to get ready. But as you said, like, that's his guy, and they're in a playoff position, which we're going to discuss later. You're not too thrilled with the number of playoff positions available.
Well, no, I don't mind the format. I just think we'll get into my mediocrity theories and stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a great televised event. I really think that the innovations that TV now has, it's like when you used to watch a golf tournament and they would show the sky and you're supposed to believe there's a golf ball up there somewhere. The innovations in television for baseball have made it almost better than being at the ballpark. And I for one, appreciate the technology.
No question about that. And a shout out to the Blue Jays, of course, who were there. I thought it was great, even though the Blue Jays didn't have any starters. I thought it was great how much Vladdy was able to play in the game, how much Bo was able to play. They got good runs. Whit Merrifield was in there toward the end. The scary moment, of course, Griff, was Jordan Romano leaving with lower back tightness on his left side. So you just got to hope that was a not too intense spasm or something. But, when they're specifying the side, and I'm starting to think, geez, I hope that's not an oblique or something to do with the core, because that could be a little longer. Thank goodness, though, in general, it's not an arm injury.
Yeah, and with Jordan Romano, he's got in a Blue Jays game, he's got his little ticks and habits that he does. He gets up in the early innings and he goes through the pantomime without a baseball or without throwing a baseball, of stretching and everything. And this is a way different experience. He was told, I'm assuming he was told, what inning he would pitch, but it's not your stage out there. You get up when you're going to pitch, you throw. So he was completely out of his normal routine. And as you said, hopefully it's just a twinge of a lower back. And he felt, as soon as he felt it, he would have come out of the game. He would have taken himself out, because these guys know that their main responsibility is to their team. And yeah, so hopefully by the weekend he'll be back and available.
Any other thoughts you want to get to on the All-Star game before we pivot to the draft?
Well, I mean, the home run derby.
Yes, the Derby. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Vlad, well, the Latin connection in the home run derby, and I know that Adley Rutschman, he stole the show by switch hitting and going his extra minute from the right side and hitting 7 bombs, which is terrific. But the enthusiasm and the spirit of the home run derby is just carried by the Caribbean, the Latino Hispanic players, and it's just tremendous to watch, and the interaction between opponents like Vlad and everyone else is just tremendous. And it brought back to me memories of covering the home run derbies and how the format now is so much better with a time limit, and just, I mean, they could do better of using cameras to show the home runs that go out, because Eduardo Perez was telling us that every ball that was hit was going out. But it brought me back to in Detroit, at the All-Star game in Detroit. I had one of those outfield press box seats.
Yeah.
In deep right center field, and Bobby Abreu was he was the hero of that home run derby, and he seemed to zero in on my section. At one point, I turned around and I felt like Tippi Hedren and the Birds, because there were like 15 geeks with gloves, and they were just hovering. They were waiting. And when that ball would come out there off of Abreu's bat, all of a sudden I'd have guys from Dayton bouncing across the desktops trying to round up those balls. It was one of the scariest experiences I had as a writer. But yeah, no,
geeks with gloves.
Geeks with gloves.
Tools from Toledo.
But yeah, so that's always a highlight. It's way better. Again, I hate to bash other sports, but the slam dunk competition has become horrible. And like the skills competition in the NHL, who remembers the next day who won the hardest shot award or the fastest skater award? But the home run derby lives forever.
Yeah, I mean, and I take the spirit of it. I agree with you about the format, because it used to just drag.
Yeah.
Right. And
if you were there in person, it was like there was so much dead air. On TV. They can fill it with other content, but when you're at the game or when you're at the derby, under the old format, there was just so much dead air. Plus Chris Berman, how often can you go?
It's I don't know. It's like I'm in a chicken coop for 2.5 hours. But you're talking about the auxiliary press boxes, which Major League Baseball opens up at all big events. So the All-Star game, of course, when there's more media than just the 2 local beats, the All-Star game, playoff series, and all of that. So you were in one of the Aux press boxes for that Bobby Abreu light show. Man, oh man, I remember covering the division series in 2013 between the Red Sox and Tigers. The gonads were up in the abdomen for some of the games of that series, Griff, freezing the you-know-what's off in October, sitting out in left field. It was left field for that series in Detroit. And all that. But yeah, I mean, those are great memories. And you even coming up on the 40th anniversary of the 84 game at Tiger Stadium, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting this right? So that was a huge year for the Tigers. They start 35-5 in 40 games. They host the All-Star game, and they go on to blow out the Padres in the World Series. You're there working for the Montreal Expos, media relations, 84 All-Star game in Detroit. And you're out one night at a rooftop bar. Is it in Detroit?
It was.
And you almost
rooftop bar at the at the Renaissance Center. So it was like as high as you could get in Detroit.
Well, the two big towers right on the water.
Yeah.
Where the Marriott still is.
Correct.
And you almost got into an arm wrestling or
wrist. It was last call, so it was 2:30 in the morning.
And you'd only had 1.5 beers by that point.
Yeah, no, I just got back from the game, right?
Yeah.
And Dave Van Horn was doing the Canadian radio for the World Series, so I was with Dave. And Mike Martinez, New York Times. They no longer have a sports section, but Mike was a columnist for the Times. And there were like 3 or 4 other guys. And at the next table was a couple of Amazonian-looking women. And it turns out one of them was the Fabulous Moolah. And the Fabulous Moolah was a headliner at the time. And we all knew her. It was 1984. So this was...
She's the best female wrestler ever, arguably.
Oh, okay. Well, I was about to find that out because I challenged her to a grapple, one of those hands in the air and lock hands. And just as we were about, and she took the challenge, just as we were about to get into it, the lights went up and the bouncer came over and said, hey, you got to go. You got to take that somewhere else. You got to take that outside. And so that ended the grapple challenge. And as we were leaving the bar, she turned to Dave Van Horn and she said, your friend was lucky. And they went, why is that? And she said, I was going to knee him in the balls. And I went, in hindsight, I'm thinking I only had 1 child at that time. And now I got 4. So like my family appreciates last call.
Well, and so do I, because I couldn't co-host a podcast with somebody coming on going, man, the Blue Jays played well last night. Oh, yeah, it looked pretty good.
But that wasn't the highlight of my 84 World Series. The highlight was after the Tigers won and the streets were on fire and there were police cars outside Tiger Stadium upside down and some were on fire. Little Caesars flew by helicopter pizza in for everybody who was stranded in Tiger Stadium who had been working. And so I sat across the table from Vin Scully and we shared pepperoni pizza from Little Caesars. That was the highlight of my World Series right there.
So please tell me that Vin Scully sat there eating pizza with you and went on some 30-minute diatribe about Julius Caesar. I'll never forget, like Vin Scully, obviously the greatest. When Socrates Brito, this was long before we in Toronto were intrigued by the handedness. But when Socrates Brito was playing for Arizona, I had like a Diamondbacks Dodgers game on, and Vin spent the entire... So Brito comes up, I think he led the inning off or something. And Vin spent the entire half inning talking about the Greek... I'm going to get this wrong. Is it poet or philosopher or
philosopher?
Philosopher, okay. Socrates. Vin, classic, right? Classic.
Vin, I think Vin, if I recall correctly, was just talking about, he was describing the pizza in his usual poetic voice. Yeah. And I think he said, and I'm going to be now eating the Azure blue cheese surrounding the pepperoni. But it was great. He was... just in hindsight, you don't realize how much you will appreciate moments like that when they happen. Yeah. But, like that was 40 years ago, 39 years ago, and I'm still remembering it like it was yesterday because it was Vin Scully, and he's a Hall of Famer and a legend.
Think of the week you had, Griff, in that October 84. You almost got kneed in the nuts by the Fabulous Moolah, which, by the way, because I'm a wrestling nerd, the first WrestleMania was the following March at Madison Square Garden, WrestleMania 1. Think of the intergender barroom brawl match you could have had with the Fabulous Moolah if you had hung in and worked with her to promote that, right? Because she had an in with Vince McMahon. and you had pizza with Vin Scully. Vin Scully could have been in your corner. He could have been your manager for the intergender barroom brawl match at the first WrestleMania if you'd only kept in touch with the fabulous Moolah.
And the third part of the hat trick in '84 was going to Lindell AC, which was a curiosity at the time because it was in the Ron LaFleur movie. Ron LaFleur had just played with the Expos in 1980. And so that was a legendary spot. And Dave and I went for lunch, then went to, I think it was game 3. And yeah, so it was a huge World Series, and I remember it all fondly, except for, well, now I remember the fabulous Moolah fondly. I might not have if the lights hadn't gone up and they had thrown us out.
Yeah, there was a whole Dark Side of the Ring episode, which is a Vice TV series about some of the darker side of wrestling, and they pick individuals or general storylines. There was a whole episode on the fabulous Moolah. You should check that one out, Griff. You might have had that happened. You might have been a footnote at the very end of that Dark Side of the Ring episode. And here lies Richard Griffin.
She ain't a beauty, but hey, she's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with a line for that, and you stumped me. I had one, and then I'm like, nah, it probably won't work. Griffsthepitch.com. Griffsthepitch.com is where you can get Griff's complete catalog of work, multiple weekly columns on the Blue Jays and Major League Baseball, a weekly MLB Power Rankings column. You get the Exit Philosophy podcast linked to griffsthepitch.com, and he also has exclusive conversations with some current and former high-profile ball players, typically with ties to the Blue Jays or Expos. So the entire catalog is there. You can go back and listen to some old interviews, and I think some real cool conversations are also coming up. Get that at griffsthepitch.com.
And tomorrow it will be a column on the first half and the All-Star Game festivities, some of which we're talking about now, but I'll expand on them a little bit and what to expect from the Jays going into the second half. So more content coming out on Thursday.
All right. So we'll touch on this. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm adjusting my hat to look really official and smart, because we're now about to do something, Griff, that nobody in their right minds ever does, which is attempt to analyze a draft class. Because who in the hell knows?
Right.
Right? I mean, like, who in the hell really knows?
We talk about baseball and compare it to other sports, and we say the All-Star Game in baseball is the best. Well, the draft in baseball is the biggest crapshoot. And like, they try and make the draft coverage, the TV part of it, comparable to the NFL or the NBA drafts. And it's ridiculous, because other than the nerds and the geeks and those from Trenton with gloves, Dayton, sorry, hovering for home run derby,
or
Toledo. Other than the real insiders in baseball, the names that are being drafted in baseball are obscure. Nobody knows who they are outside their own families. And the NBA and the NFL have that advantage. So baseball will never have a draft day coverage, a TV show as good as any of those other sports. So,
right. Well, and
All-Star Game great, draft not so great.
Well, I'll take it one step further. And some of these kids being taken in any round, first round included, are high school kids. So they're 17 or 18 years old. You've obviously never heard of them. And to your point about football, basketball, typically these kids are coming out of high level and well publicized college programs.
And I forgot the US. NHL is the same thing, because there's so many junior teams and everybody knows those kids.
Absolutely. And the difference between the NHL, NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball is that in the NFL, a first round draft pick is expected to make the team and contribute significantly that coming season. The NBA is a 2-round draft, right? Because roster sizes in basketball are a lot smaller. And you would like to, certainly with the top half of the first round, you want a guy who, if he's not a top flight contributor, is going to be a decent rotation piece for you out of the gate as he grows into the game. NHL, it's kind of the same, right? You want a top half of the first round pick to be on your team that coming season. In baseball, like John Olerud is still talked about 35 years later for being a guy who never played a minor league baseball game. Like even the Joe Mauers and the Chris Bryants and the Mark Pryors and Adley Rutschmans to be a little more current. All these guys, Griff, develop in the minor leagues. Some it doesn't take long to get to the big leagues, but they're not coming to their team right away.
And my feeling, and I've recommended it in columns in the past when I was at the Star and now Griff's the Pitch, is that baseball needs to do something to attract the best athletes to Major League Baseball. And to me, the thing is to shorten that time frame for the top athletes to reach the major leagues. And people will go, oh, well, baseball is such a cerebral game and there's so many aspects to it that you need to perfect in the minor leagues. Well, baseball is losing some of the best athletes, especially African-American athletes, and that's something that they're looking to try and improve on. They're down to, I think, 7.9% African-American representation in Major League Baseball. But when kids look at the NBA, and you've outlined getting to the association much more quickly, the NFL, same thing. I mean, you're on a roster and you could work your way in on special teams and then become a contributor. Baseball needs to get the best athletes, move them to the major leagues more quickly, show young athletes that this is a possibility before the draft so that they get more people playing in the high school and college levels. And I think that that's a way of doing it. I mean, when you say, well, you're going to be living with the mistakes that they make, hell, we see mistakes from guys who have been in the minor leagues for 3 or 4 years, or guys who have been in the major leagues for 3.
Have you watched the Blue Jays run the bases this year?
Right. I mean, absolutely.
Anybody?
if an athlete is superior, then you can live with the mistakes. That's my feeling. I mean, especially with expanded playoffs, which we'll get into later, you can make a mistake and still be the third wild card in that position. And once you're on the dance floor in October, who knows?
So the Blue Jays take 2 Canadians in the draft. There were 9 Canadians taken overall. And by the way, shout out to the Naylor family. I don't know what's in the water coming through that family's taps, Griff, but if all 3 Naylor kids end up being guys, and Josh already is, that's really impressive. I mean, to have grown up in this area, and we love our baseball, but we're a hockey first country. You've got other options. Soccer, basketball are on the rise, and that's been well talked about. But for one singular family to have had 3 kids come up in this area and be drafted by Major League Baseball teams, that is seriously impressive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and Miles, who is an infielder and highly regarded, especially because I think lineage and with Josh and Bo already having been drafted in the first round, that plays a factor just in terms of name recognition for kids. And Miles, I think, went 39th to Oakland, and Matt Higginson, the signing scout, another one of my boys. Yeah.
Higgy played baseball with my brother growing up.
Oakville kid, and he came to the winter meetings in Orlando, stayed in my hotel room looking for a job, had one suit. His grandmother bought him a suit. He interviewed with Gord Ash, and he interviewed with someone else wearing the same suit the whole time. Got a job, and God bless him, it's been 15 years, and he's doing a great job for the A's, and he was the guy who landed Miles Naylor. And what a family that is. What an area that is. What an example that is for young kids coming up and looking to play an elite program and maybe make the junior national team and then go on and get drafted. Yeah, it's a great story.
By the way, Griff, we should probably spend another 5 minutes kissing Matt Higginson's ass because he's about to be working for Las Vegas, which, you know, if he relocates, there might be a palatial mansion down there and we can just come and hang out, you know, like.
I mean, I gave him a room.
You can walk in and be like, hey, remember when I put you up in my hotel room?
Giving me a room.
Yeah. You got 19 guest bedrooms. Can I have one? I'll take the one with the ensuite for a couple of nights. What do you think? What do you?
Good point.
Yeah.
I'm writing that down right now. That's a thing to do in 2025, let's say.
Here's always a brilliant idea is to move your page of notes in front of the camera, which I just did if you're watching on YouTube and completely blocked out my face. The Blue Jays in the first round, 20th overall, take 17-year-old Arjun Nimmala. So this is a cool story. He is a Tampa Bay area kid. He is the first South Asian player of South Asian descent to be taken that high in the draft. And of course, he will, if he makes the Blue Jays one day, will be playing in a very diverse city. So that's a wonderful story. And the Jays take two, as I said earlier, Canadians, Connor O'Halloran. You may remember his dad, who was like a backup catcher for a little while for the Blue Jays 3 decades ago. Greg O'Halloran, Connor O'Halloran, taken in the 5th round, 157th overall. And Sam Shaw from BC, taken in the 9th round, 247th overall.
Yeah, you know, Greg O'Halloran, who was Connor's dad, wouldn't have been drafted because there's only 20 rounds now, and he was a 33rd or 34th round draft pick. But that's great. It's great for the family. Connor went down and he was pitching at Michigan. He's got high 80s fastball, but a wipeout slider, and could be coming out of the bullpen in the minor leagues and working his way up. Sam Shaw, West Coast kid, and he was scouted by another guy who stayed in my room at the winter meetings looking for a job. So we have Matt Higginson, and then Pat Griffin, who I think to be my son.
I think this particular scout may have stayed under the same roof as you for more than one night.
Oh, yeah. So. Well, this was in DC, and this was his first winter meetings, and he was looking for a job, and he ended up going to Vancouver. This is Pat going to Vancouver as a video coordinator for 2 years, and then has worked his way up. So, you know, he was 2 years with the Blue Jays before I joined the Blue Jays for 4 seasons. So what's the opposite of nepotism? I think I got my job through him.
Yeah.
And he's still there and I'm gone.
Yeah, Richard. I mean, Griff's been in the game for like 45 years at this point, but he only got the job because his kid works there, man.
But Sam Shaw's another good story. 9th rounder. He showed well at all the prospect camps throughout the summer. He's 18 years old and he may grow. He's like 5'10", 180, something like that, but he's got a quick bat and he's got a chance to move up. And that's the first recommendation for this particular Blue Jays scout. And we're looking forward to a lot more, but congratulations to everyone involved.
Yeah. And Griff, you know it far better than me because obviously your son Pat. So you live it day to day with him, and I'm sure he talks about the work and the grind of it too with all the travel. Like it's the draft is about the names of the players and the speculation about who they could become and where they fit in. But the work scouts do and the miles scouts log on the roads, in the air, it is a lifestyle, and it's fun work, it's great work, but it is a grind. So, you know, teams celebrate World Series wins and this and that. Scouts, mid-July, the draft is a huge time of year for a scout. Arguably the biggest time of year when one of their guys gets picked, right? Because they put that name on the table.
Definitely, and the one aspect that that stands out in terms of scouts being dismissed by a lot of the general population is that when you have a high school kid who has an opportunity to go to a major university, you're battling that. You have to not only offer money, you not only have to pick them in the right round, but you have to have the relationship with the player and the family and the agent to convince them that your organization is the best fit. Otherwise, I think Sam Shaw had a chance to go to Xavier, had a commit to Xavier. Arjun Nimala had a commit to Florida State. So it's the relationship that the scouts have with the families and the agent and the player themselves that makes the big difference. And, you could run numbers through a computer and say, well, this kid compares at this spot to other players throughout North America, but that's not going to do it. You need the hands-on presence of scouts, and you got to respect the jobs that they do and the time that they put in away from their families. And it's an underrated skill and a talent, and it's a community. It's a community. All the scouts they know each other, even from other organizations, and they know where they're going to be at a certain time, and they see all those other organization scouts, and they're not sharing any information that they know. It's like how's the family, and what do you think of this guy? Well, I can't tell you that. I mean, we're not going to talk about that.
But it's the same, Griff, in the way you're talking right now. It's the same as being on the beat.
Yeah,
like somebody
absolutely.
who works for Sportsnet isn't going for a beer with somebody who works at the Star and talking about a scoop that they think they have.
Yeah, we can all relate to that.
Yeah, you're socializing or you're living it, right? TSN and telling Sportsnet what they know, blah 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 blah. But you're all friends because you all you're all friends if you're normal people.
Yeah, right.
There are some weirdos who,
which we won't get into.
Yeah, but you live that life.
Yeah,
and you can go home to a partner or a spouse or whatever. They experience the life through you, but they're not living that grind. In the same way with scouts, only scouts understand the grind.
Correct.
Understand the pressure, understand the life, right? That's it.
I did one column as a scout. I think Tony LaCava sent me to Lakeland High School. It was, I pitched it to them. I said, can I scout for you? And it was a unique situation. And I wrote about it in a column that I just was going through some old clippings a week ago, and I found it and I read it and I laughed because now my son is going through all that stuff, and I don't think he had the same experience as me, because they looked at me as an outsider. Here I was parking in the scouts row of the parking lot and showing up. Hey guys, Dana Brown was also at that game, and now he's a GM of the Astros, and I'm writing Griff's The Pitch and working on exit philosophy.
Well, if tomorrow's column is a particularly good one and Dana happens to see it, Griff, you could be sticking that for sale sign on the front lawn and moving to Houston.
Oh, no doubt. I'd do that.
No. Yeah. Just
open carry, a pickup truck.
Oh yeah.
Gun, beer, shotgun.
Count the bail bonds places on the walk from the hotel to the stadium, and if you hit 12, you've taken the right route.
I was going to say you've taken the right route.
The best, by the way, the best, you walk, because you stay at the Icon in downtown Houston, and the best thing I saw in a bail bonds place window, and it was like, the old Batman TV series in the 60s where they'd get in a fight and then pow and bam would show up on the screen, and in those little animated boxes
or whatever.
Yeah, so in the window, similarly, in the window of one of the bail bonds places, you ring, we spring.
I I got
Call us and we'll get you out of jail.
In the 1990 World Series, I got in trouble as a PR guy because Marge Schott, the game was Cincinnati, and then it moved to Oakland. And in Cincinnati, as a senior PR guy there, I was called down because one of the AP writers was on deadline, and he was going up the elevator, and he was in a hurry, and he had a short temper anyway. And the elevator was waiting for Marge Schott and Shotzi, her dog or bulldog or whatever he is. And so like this guy would not take no for an answer. And he was like physically trying to push the button to get the elevator up. And they called the police in and had him arrested, pulled out of the elevator. He missed deadline. So we fly to Oakland, and as we're going to the ballpark and I'm in charge of game notes, I write down the bail bonds number, and at the lead of the notes package that day was numbers to remember, ALPR, NLPR, ABC bail bonds. And I was chastised and called out by the Baseball Writers Association of America for having no respect for their profession. And then I spent 22 years as one of them. So...
And then they have the goal to say that today's human beings are soft.
Right.
Hey, that somehow today, it's only today that true comedy isn't appreciated. 33 years ago, true comedy was not appreciated by the audience, Griff.
Clearly.
I'm finding that out. By the way, please tell me Marge Schott had a cigarette in her mouth and 2 other cigarettes in each nostril.
Correct. She did. I was in that elevator and witness, and what you described is exactly what Marge Schott.
There is no doubt in my mind that Marge Schott would have been the type of person to blow a dart in an elevator, a confined space. No doubt.
It's her elevator. She's the worst owner in the history of Major League Baseball.
So aside, and I feel like I'm
World Series.
I feel like I'm throwing important stuff aside, but aside from the whole like thing she said about Nazis not being all that bad, when John McSherry collapsed on the field on opening day 1995 in Cincinnati, the home plate umpire, who very sadly was morbidly obese, collapsed and ultimately died of a heart attack later that day in hospital.
Yep.
And her reaction was, because I don't know if people remember this, but Cincinnati always played its home opener
traditional
first.
Home opener, yeah.
Afternoon game, Reds play at home. That started the Major League season. And she said something like, he ruined my opening day.
Why does it always happen to me, she said.
Why does it always happen to me?
And then she sent flowers. She sent flowers that were in her office from opening day to the funeral. That was her presentation.
She regifted
the
flowers for the funeral.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make that stuff up. I had no idea we were going to get to Marge Schott today, but God bless America. And
we haven't even got to the Blue Jays
and no one else yet. Oh, which we need to, which we absolutely need to. So, because we got to talk about the road trip, and you and I, again, we're talking on Wednesday morning, July the 12th. We decided to wait through the draft, the Derby, and the All-Star game so that we could compile all of this stuff. If we had recorded on Monday, the draft wouldn't have been done, and the Derby and the All-Star game wouldn't have happened. So this is Wednesday morning, July 12th, as we're talking. The last time we did a podcast, it was 9 days ago, Griff, and I said the Blue Jays need to go at least 4-2 on this road trip through 2 cities with bad teams. They go 5-1, so thumbs up. You don't take anything away from the record. But explain to me which of the concerning questions about this Blue Jays team got addressed on that road trip, even though they went 5-1. I would answer this: 0 of those concerning questions got answered. 0.
I think that the one constant that you and I both agreed on is that the starting pitching, which is their most reliable area, you got 4 veteran guys being paid 4 of the 5 top salaries on the team. And so that makes them the most reliable, or the most expectation coming from that group. And they did their job. I mean, they kept them in ball games, but you look at the 12 innings, 6-2 victory, whatever it was, they had 1 hit through the first 11 innings.
The Thursday game in Chicago. Yeah.
Through the first 10 innings.
Right.
1 hit through the first 10 innings, and then they got no hit a couple of days later. And when we talked about the concerns on that road trip, it was the offense, the consistency, people stepping up, that sort of thing, and we didn't see it.
Griff, don't forget Sunday. For 26 outs, they looked helpless. And Alex Lang walks Matt Chapman with 2 outs in the top of the 9th inning to bring Danny Jansen to the plate in a 3-1 Tigers game. And Jano goes deep to left center field in a big ballpark. And I'm thinking to myself, first of all, that's awesome. And how many times do you go on to win a game where that happens? Right? Like there's no empirical data that I can point to. I'm just assuming, like, there's no way the Tigers are scoring a run in the bottom of the 9th to win 4-3 after that. It just doesn't seem to ever work out that way. So huge moment for Danny Jansen. And I went online after he hit the home run and I typed in large steak and I Google imaged it and I tweeted out, here is the size of the steak dinner that Guillermo Martinez, the Blue Jays hitting coach, will be buying Danny Jansen sometime during the All-Star break. I have no idea if that saved Martinez's job. And quite frankly, it should not have, Griff, because if you've decided to stick with Martinez, what happened on Sunday should not change that. And if you've decided to fire Martinez, what happened on Sunday should not change that. But from an optics point of view, man, that was a huge moment for the Blue Jays and snatched victory from the jaws of defeat.
I mean, I don't know what the definition or what input goes into wins above replacement and into WAR. But I do know that Danny Jansen had 2 walk-offs earlier in the season, and that game-tying home run with 1 out to go in Detroit, that was a huge win for them. So that's 3 games. If his WAR is not higher than 3, then there's something wrong here.
WAR, what is it good for?
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, what is it good for? But in terms of the hitting coach, I mean, we've talked about it. This team is underperforming as a group of hitters. There's just no other way of looking at it other than Bo Bichette and maybe Jansen, because you're not expecting a lot of average.
Whit Merrifield.
But even a close look at his numbers, he was an all-star twice in Kansas City. And his numbers, I mean, that should be expected. Nobody in Toronto, none of the fan base across the country was expecting that from Whit Merrifield, because Santiago Espinal was an all-star last year. Kevin Biggio has been there as a second baseman. So who knew how much playing time he was going to get? But Whit Merrifield has taken advantage of every opportunity he's had to play. He plays left field when Kevin Kiermaier sits, and he plays second base when George Springer sits, and he plays second base most of the time. So, I'm not sure whether that's such a surprise what Merrifield has produced, but Bo has been, maybe Bo is just an expectation of a 25-year-old getting better, even though his numbers have started at such a high level. But that brings us back to the hitting instruction. There's so many guys that have a hand in being hitting coaches with the current Blue Jays. I don't know, they hit when they get there. They hit in the cage with Dave Hudgens and Hunter Mentz. and Guillermo Martinez, and they see so much video. Why is what's the problem? What is creating a situation where, you know, everybody faces 95 to 100-mile-an-hour guys coming out of the bullpen, so that can't be it. But they're runners in scoring position, and clutch hitting has put them in a position where they're hanging on to a third wild card spot, and everybody's thrilled.
I don't. Could it be paralysis by overanalysis, or is there even such a thing? Is there even such a thing as overanalysis in this day and age? And you know, I'll say this: Bo has had a wonderful season, and Bo had a wonderful final 6 weeks of the regular season last year. And I mean, Bo's just generally a very good baseball player, on the verge of being great. You might argue that he already is great, and I wouldn't fight back on that too much. I wish Bo would take a few more walks, but I also accept that Bo is who he is, and he will tell you he is who he is. And I think Bo's just like, you know what? I'm going to approach hitting the way I'm comfortable, and it's working for him. And I wonder sometimes if maybe other guys are getting caught in between and overthinking too much. I mean, that was a thing that Bo talked about last year, is he was thinking too much in the first half of the season when he was getting on base less than 30% of the time. You know, maybe you just got to clear your head on occasion.
You know, the thing about wish you would take more walks, when someone has elite bat to ball skills.
Fair. Yeah.
When someone has elite bat to ball skills, that means when they swing the bat, there's a lot of times where they're going to be making contact and putting the ball in play, whereas someone else on the same team could take a swing at that same pitch and foul it off, or swing and miss and get deeper into counts. And then once you're deeper in a count, you know, walks are likely to come, more walks are likely to come. So maybe it's not the fact of Bo Bichette or players with that bat to ball skill being less patient. Maybe it's because they're more talented. And I believe that that's the situation with Bo, is that he puts more balls in play because of his elite skills as a hitter. And so it looks like he's not as selective.
Yeah, no, fair comment. And I mean, Bo's been their best hitter this year by a wide margin. I was thinking, Griff, at the time, well, after the Jays won the game, certainly at the moment of the Jansen home run, but after they won the game, the Marcus Semien throwing error game against the Tigers at Rogers Center in early September 2021, Jays would go on to miss the playoffs by a game. That helped to sink their season. I think Sunday's game, being still relatively early, will probably go overlooked. But if the Blue Jays make the playoffs by a game or two, that result on Sunday and that Danny Jansen home run is a huge, huge deal. I don't think we'll look back on it front of mind, but we should.
I think inside the clubhouse, you know, you talk about the last game of a homestand or the last game of a road trip with an off day the next day. And there's a lot made always about, if you win that game, especially in dramatic fashion, that off day is much easier to absorb. And then you go into the next game, whether it be still on the road or back home, you go into the next game with a positive attitude. Now think about Danny Jansen home run, tying the game, they win before the All-Star break. Now you got 4 of those games, 4 of those days off before playing again. And that makes it even more important, as you describe, in terms of what it does within that clubhouse.
Well, what's the narrative around the team? And they would say, well, we don't listen to the media and we're not paying attention. They'd be talking about it themselves, or at least as individuals thinking about it themselves. To have been no hit on Saturday and to have scored 1 run, had Chapman not walked and Jansen not hit that home run, to have scored 1 run and look generally impotent in doing that on the Sunday going into the All-Star break against Detroit. Not good, Griff.
Two
I
things.
mean, it's a big script flipper for them.
Two things. Don't say generally impotent after we've just talked about the fabulous Moolah almost kneeing me in the balls, please.
Okay.
And then the other thing is
Noted.
when you said about they say they don't pay attention to the media. When you go to lunch with Ricky Romero, you ask him about whether they pay attention to media.
Oh.
I felt the brunt of a lot of that.
Yeah.
And like there was never a day when I was writing where I would get up and look in the mirror and go, oh God, how can I live with myself because of what I wrote? It was always writing opinion, not necessarily the opinion that was favorable in the clubhouse, but it was always writing an opinion. And if you write it the way that you can live with yourself and look at yourself in the mirror, then that's always good. And
it's not personal.
Yeah.
And I'm there today to answer for what I wrote last night. If you, player X, want to talk to me about it or yell at me.
And like JP Ricciardi was not one of my favorites. I was not one of his favorites. And on the final day of the season in 2009, maybe.
So his last year, his last day?
Yeah. No, 2008, because he still had another year. Yeah. We were in the bathroom standing at adjoining urinals, and he looked at me and he said, Rich, you're lucky I'm a Christian. He says, how can you look at yourself in the morning? And I'm going like, I can, I do, I will. And then he said, if I wasn't a Christian, I would have punched you in the face by now. And I, okay. And this is all conversation at a urinal, which is, distracting at best. And so the point being that most of the stuff that's written and that even that we're discussing on Exit Philosophy is based on the reality of a situation, and it's not based on people disliking, it's based on reality, and that's what we try and present.
Yeah, I do like JP Ricciardi in that moment at a urinal, essentially admitting I'd be a bad person, but I'm religious. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thumbs up, pal. Thanks a lot. Is that your testimony? Is that your testimony?
My thumbs are busy.
Yeah, my thumbs are busy. Alek Manoah. Got to get to Alek Manoah. So my favorite part of his line, Griff, was the 0 walks. His Friday night start in Detroit, his return to the major leagues after more than a month. He had gone down to work at the pitching lab in Dunedin. He had thrown a rather unsightly line in a complex league game and then had looked much better in a AA game for the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. So he comes back, generally looks good. Again, my favorite part of the line, 0 walks. I'll offer this as both a good thing, and I'll defer to you for analysis on it if you're comfortable giving it, because I don't know. I know what I saw. I just don't know what I believe about it, and I don't know if it matters that much. I did think that he hung his slider, or at least left it up, more than I'd be comfortable with, yet on 2 of those occasions, those upper zone sliders or hanging sliders were taken for called third strikes by right-handed hitters. So while I didn't like the location of the slider, I wondered, is Alek doing something, or has he fixed something that better disguises what's coming? Because instead of those pitches being swung at and hit 400 feet the other way, they're causing the hitter's knees to buckle. That's a good thing, even if the location isn't great. I don't know where you come down on the outing in general, but also what I just said there.
I think the most impressive or the most encouraging thing about Manoah's appearance against the Tigers was the fact that he threw more pitches that were competitive. Mm-hmm. He had put himself in his first 2 months, he had put himself in hitters' counts by throwing pitches, sliders especially, that weren't competitive at all, that didn't even tease somebody into should they swing the bat or not. So now all of a sudden you're 2-0 and you haven't thrown a competitive pitch yet. And they know you can't, you're having trouble throwing the slider for a strike. So they're sitting on a fastball and boom, here it comes and they swing. I will agree with you that it's not a true indication hanging those sliders at the top of the zone or whatever pitches they are at the top of the zone against a Tigers team when you're going to be facing teams that have proven to be much better offensively so far this season. I think that that's the true case. I think that the Blue Jays did a terrific job of sending him down to the lowest level, to the pitching lab in the complex league, because he wasn't being put on the IL. He was being optioned. And I mean, we've talked about it before on Exit Philosophy that being optioned to Buffalo at that stage of your career when you've had 2 great seasons in the majors is not the best thing. It's going to take a while to recover, to get over the snit that you may feel. Being sent to New Hampshire, same thing. They sent him down where the lab could have a look at him, could show him what he had done in the past and what he was doing now. And I think that, well, I talked to some people in that clubhouse before he came back up, and he had responded well. They had corrected some of the things that they had seen, and he went to New Hampshire and showed that he had absorbed. And I approve of, or I like what the Blue Jays did in terms of handling him. They brought him up, put him in a series where he could compete against an inferior offense that had shown so far this season. And that gave them an opportunity to go 2 ways. If he had failed there, they could have sent him down to Buffalo again, because it would have been another option, 10 days surrounding the All-Star break. They could have had him pitch again on the 16th and then wouldn't have needed him in the major league rotation until the 22nd. So he would have had his 10 days in the minors, and would have had another game at AAA before coming back up and pitching again, because they are going to have to go to a 5-man rotation after the break. We saw that the fumes that Gausman was pitching on and others, you can't just rely on off days to regulate your rotation. And so they handled that well. They had him succeed against the Tigers, didn't need to send him down again to get another start at Buffalo. He now has enough bullets to carry him through the season and maybe into October if he can succeed. We're not expecting that his Detroit success will repeat itself every time he goes out there, but at least in his own mind and the confidence and the mental aspect of what he does on the mound is going to be much improved than it was before they sent him to the complex league. His mechanics have improved, maybe not all the way back to where he was. And hopefully his conditioning and everything else that surrounded his failure in the first 2 months has improved and will carry him through the rest of the season.
And I would imagine the mental decompression too, of just being out of the limelight, being down in Florida, being around the facility. Let's just let the lid off of this thing and all the pressure out, and he can bounce back. Now, Griff, I agree with you. Like, if I don't anticipate this, because it would be as wide a swing of the pendulum as there could be. If he looks like the Alek Manoah of 2021, 2022 over the final 2 months of the season, not only will the Blue Jays make the playoffs, they will feel very good about their chances in the tournament once they get there. But what they need from Manoah, what they need from him is to go out there and give them 5 or 6 innings every 5th or 6th day and be a guy who gives them a chance to win and choose up enough innings that they're not decimating their bullpen to backfill for Manoah on days that he starts. You can't ask your relievers to have to get 22 or 23 outs in a baseball game every 5th or 6th day. To say nothing of the fact that Ryu is looking good in early returns as he builds up in the minor leagues.
Well, how's this for a suggestion? Is that, well, credit Ryu also with being in Florida and being a sounding board for Alek Manoah while he was down there. And like the maturity that Ryu has compared to the youth that Manoah has. That was a good combination. They were already good friends going in. But how's this for a scenario? You go into August and September, and now you bring Ryu back, and now you have a 6-man rotation. And I figured it out from August 2nd on, that 6th spot, which let's say is Ryu's because he hasn't pitched in over a year, would only be required 7 times. And that means that either Kikuchi or Ryu could be used in a lot of situations out of the bullpen. And I would recommend using Kikuchi out of the bullpen in those
better stuff,
because he did it last year and he's got better stuff. And Meza is the only left-hander at this point out of the pen. And Kikuchi could carry you 2, 3, 4 innings when needed and keep you in ball games other than giving up the occasional bomb. But I just think that at the bottom of that 13-man pitching staff, which includes Mitch White and guys that you never see when the games are competitive, that they could be replaced, and you could have a 6-man rotation and still not dig into your bullpen or harm your bullpen. Yeah, and it would sort of, as the marathon goes on and October approaches, and if Manoah is doing his job and has returned, then as you said, 3 wildcard spots, there's a good chance that they could win enough games. They could win in the low 90s, which will get you into the playoffs because of the mediocrity that we see.
Right. And I think I think you could go 6-man rotation if everybody's throwing well, of course, and everybody's healthy. Those are the caveats. But you could go 6-man rotation for most of August, September, and then you would want to maximize the number of times Gausman is on the mound, Barrios, if he's still looking as good as he has been for most of the year, maximize the number of times he's on the mound in the final 2 weeks against Tampa Bay if you're fighting life and death to make the playoffs. The flip side of that argument, Griff, is if you're safely into a wild card spot, the question becomes, where are you among those 3 positions? Because if you are 4 or 5, and you'd be looking at 5 right now, you're getting either Tampa Bay or Baltimore by the looks of it in the first round of the playoffs. If you're 6, you're likely getting the Central Division winner, which will be Cleveland or Minnesota, and probably a 500-ish team.
Yeah, but be careful what you wish for, because we've seen that before.
The Twins do have great starting pitching
in every sport. Yeah. So, to be the best, you got to beat the best. That's a cliche.
Play
Just play whoever's on that schedule. But it would be nice to be the home wild card. But look how much that accomplished last season. So just get there, get a foot on the dance floor, and then let her rip. That's all.
What are you talking about, Griff? I thought we wiped October 2022 from the calendar. It never happened. We went straight from September to November. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I am an advocate for the expanded playoff format because all sports do it, and we need to evolve. And I am not get off my lawn or back in my day guy all of the time. But I will say, as we begin to wrap things up here, that the Blue Jays being tied for the second wild card spot right now, and fan bases of other teams like Houston, who the Blue Jays are tied with, the Yankees are a game back out of the playoffs right now. Man, do they miss Aaron Judge. I think other fan bases would have to agree. But the fact that the Blue Jays, the way that they have played this season, the fact they're tied for the second wild card spot right now as we begin the unofficial second half of the year coming out of the All-Star break is a celebration, if that's the right word, of mediocrity. It ain't the 80s anymore where you had to win one of 2 divisions to make your league's playoffs. And I think that's a good thing. But also, I don't look at this Blue Jays team and think to myself, they are playoff deserving right now.
Yeah, I mean, you could, there's nothing great about your fans chanting, "We're number 12," and making the playoffs. That mediocrity is enough to keep most teams interested in terms of late August and going into September. And Scotty, you think back on televised games or scenarios in the second half of September over the last few years since they expanded the playoffs, and the interest in those weekend games in the last 2 weeks has been worth it, in terms of welcoming mediocrity onto the October dance floor. It's been worth it because in past years with a 40-man roster, 40-man expanded roster in September, you had maybe 3/4 of the teams playing kids against teams that were trying to compete for the postseason. And it didn't seem fair, like that somebody's playing all their rookies from AAA and you're looking down the road and seeing this game unfolding and going, they should be competing harder because we have a chance to make it. And now with more teams on that, with a chance to make the postseason, and with only a 28-man expanded September roster, it's made the entire month of September worth watching. And to me, that in itself balances against the mediocrity that we see in terms of pure baseball.
I've spent my whole life believing that people with 2 left feet like me should be allowed on the dance floor. So here's to expanding the October dance floor to everybody. Everybody, Griff.
In those square dances, when they say everybody to the right, you go, okay, that's good. But to the left, oh, sorry, I got to sit this one out. Those 2 left feet.
GriffsThePitch.com, where you can get multiple weekly Blue Jays and MLB columns, a weekly MLB Power Rankings column. You can get the Exit Philosophy podcast on GriffsThePitch.com, and you can get Griff's exclusive conversations with players of today and yesterday, a lot of former Blue Jays, a lot of former Expos, and more coming up on that front. So go to griffsthepitch.com. The one thing we didn't get to today, Griff, that I think we need to start doing weekly, the Cincinnati Reds, because Joey Votto's winding down, and they're a fun team. They're a good team. Ellie De La Cruz is awesome. Matt McLain, the young shortstop, is coming up and having an impact. This team has a vibe to it. And I know baseball's a day in, day out. Momentum's only as good as your next day's starting pitcher sport. But there's something going on in Cincinnati. And because Votto's a Toronto area kid, we got to track that starting next week.
We'll do that off the top of the show for next week's show. And that sounds good to me. That's a great team. He stole second, third, and home on 2 pitches within about 40 seconds.
Ellie, yeah.
Yeah. And that's worth noting, and that's worth watching. And the Jays play them down the road, and we'll see a contrast in styles for sure.
That puts a wrap on episode 10 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. We always are hesitant to kind of look ahead, because if we promise something and don't deliver. But I am moving next week. So Griff and I will plan to record on Sunday night. So you're getting today, which is Wednesday, July the 12th, and we expect to have another episode for you either before you go to bed late Sunday night or when you wake up Monday morning. So look forward to that as Exit Philosophy rolls on. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the start of the second half.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Scotty.